Hi everyone, my name's Michelle, and tonight this is National Adoption Awareness Month. And to start off, I'm having a guest speaker come on with me. Her name is Rebecca, and we're going to talk about her journey as a single mother through adoption. So once Rebecca's on, let me know and you can join. Request to join. Here we go. We're just waiting for her to come on. Hi.
Hi, you're
Hi.
sideways.
So
You're
are you.
sideways.
Hold on.
I am?
Yeah, hold on.
Oh, there you are. You're
That's
right
much
side up.
better.
Okay.
Hi, how are
Hi.
you?
Good. I'm so glad you can't see my messy desk.
Uh, well, I'm hiding my messy room, so
Did I see that you stapled your shirt to a piece of paper today?
yeah.
Ugh.
I was so focused and I just kept hitting the stapler, and all of a sudden I went to go move my arm up and I was like, oh, I was like, something's like weighing it down, and I was like, well, that's great.
Oops.
So,
Oopsies.
how are you today?
I'm good. I'm drinking this weird, crazy, big old something. Peace tea. That's what I'm
Oh,
drinking. Peace tea.
very cool.
Yeah.
So, Rebecca, thank you so much for coming on with me. I'm gonna introduce you to everyone. Well, actually,
Awesome.
there's only a couple really on right now, so maybe I'll
Well,
just
you
wait
were
for a couple more to come on.
cool. You were with
Yeah.
me last night, and that went really well. And you're still getting thank you for sharing your
Aw,
story. And
good. That's amazing. Good.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I
so
was so
fun.
nervous last night. I was like, when I got off, I was like, I hope I actually like gave like the right message to them, because I
For
felt like I was just like
sure.
blabbling on and on.
You know what? Anytime you can share your story, it'll hit somebody in a way that you least expect it. And so you never
Exactly.
know. And the beautiful thing about social media, for the most part, it depends what you're on, is that it lives there so people can
View it
continue to
anytime.
watch.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
Let's see.
So
Oh, I
just waiting
wish.
for a
I know
couple.
I was seeing if I could push it out, but they'll find us.
That's okay. What did you do today?
Work. I mean, I always work. But I haven't had a refrigerator that works since Saturday.
Oh no.
Yeah, that's been fun. And I figured out a solution, except for today when it was 68 degrees and everything in my cooler in my garage. Oh, forget it. It's going in the garbage now.
Oh,
So
that
my son and I went
stinks.
for subs. He came home and he had a tutor and some homework. And then we went for a quick Ben and Jerry's run. And now I'm here with
Nice.
you.
Sounds like a good day.
Yeah. Hey, I don't know about you, but during this pandemic, it's been about a pint a night. Who else is with, and I'm not talking about beer.
Uh,
I'm talking about ice cream.
beer, ice cream, whatever.
Who else is with
Whatever
me? I
gets you
want to
through the
know.
day.
I know.
Oh, that's funny. So let's see, we have, so my friend Danielle joined. Hi, Danielle.
Hi, Danielle.
Lotus and, oh, sorry, I'm
I see Meldine.
Maldine, yeah. Hi, thank you so much for joining. We're just waiting for more.
What
That's
about you?
always,
Okay,
my
I'm
friends.
with you eating gelato right now. Oh,
Oh, you
yum.
can
That's
see
what I
the
really want.
comments.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know the other
What kind of
person could see it.
gelato? What kind of gelato did you have? That's what I want to know. Gelato's my favorite. And last night we went with my mom to eat in Little Italy, and that was
Hi,
interesting
Matthew.
because we're on different sides of the political equation. So that was interesting. But
Yes.
we went to Little Italy for dinner, and I was the only one who wanted gelato afterwards. They made me go home.
Aw.
So what kind of gelato did you have?
Um,
Whoever
she
shared that
must
they had
be
gelato.
really enjoying it because she's not telling
Yeah.
us.
Uh, oh, lemon and
Lemon
chocolate.
chocolate. Oh, that's an interesting combination.
Hi, Danielle.
That's my
Wait,
best friend.
that's your friend, because I know a Danielle. No, anyways, something similar in Cleveland.
I texted her. I was like, I'm going live in 15. You're coming on.
Now she's got to stay on, whoever the two people are. Be part of the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Join in.
I mean, we can start whenever you want.
Yeah, you know what?
Totally
Let's
up to you.
start, and then when people come on, they'll just hear what we, so far. So, this is Rebecca. She is the founder of RG Adoption Consulting Agency, and she also is founder of Back to the Roadmap Fund. So, can you explain that a little bit to everyone?
Yeah. So RG Adoption Consulting is, I'm an adoption consultant. And what that means is that we guide hopeful adoptive parents through the adoptive process. And it's just domestic infant adoption. And we basically hold their hands throughout the entire journey because there's just so much that you don't even know you don't know.
Yeah.
And it's an overwhelming process. And our hope is that our families will be able to adopt quicker using our adoption roadmap model. Most of the time when it's not COVID,
Right.
they do. Our hope is always in under a year, but we really give them the guidance and support that they're going to need throughout their entire journey because most agencies' focus is on the birth mom, which is great. And that's where a lot of their focus needs to be. And at the same time, then the hopeful adoptive parent kind of feels like, well, who's there to support us?
Right.
And that's
Exactly.
where adoption consultants fall in. And we have networks throughout the country, so that's how we're able to help them usually adopt a little bit quicker. And then back to the Roadmap Fund, I mean, that's kind of a very quick overall what we do. And then back to the Roadmap Fund is the nonprofit arm to RG Adoption Consulting.
Mm-hmm.
I started it about a year ago after I was just, at any time one of my families experienced a failed adoption, you're talking about a $10,000 to $12,000 loss. And that's really hard for anyone to recover from. And it would really keep me up at night. Unfortunately, nobody's immune. It happens. That's the sucky part of adoption.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard. So I started this. At first, I just started giving money back to my families who experienced that. And I was like, well, this isn't really sustainable. So I started a nonprofit to raise money to give grants to our families who do experience that financial loss with a failed adoption to help them get back onto the roadmap and go forward to reach their dreams.
That's amazing. That's so great that you do that.
I feel blessed about all of it. I really do. I'm doing what I love.
You are an angel on earth, so I'm sure they are very, very appreciative.
If you ask my son, he might have a different answer, but
that's funny. So, wow. So I'm gonna just start off by just having a conversation.
Okay.
Tell me about your story. Tell me, tell everyone, what led you to adoption as a single mom, and just talk about, the challenges you might have dealt with, financially, emotionally, just share anything you might tell us.
Okay. I am a single adoptive mama, first and foremost. So I did this on my own. I always and forever knew I wanted to be a mom. And most of that story had to do with having that experience of carrying a baby and feeling what that felt like. And I dated and nobody stuck. And so I thought, well, you know what? If this last boyfriend doesn't stick, I'm going to just try it on my own. So
that sounds like my life as you're telling us again.
It hasn't changed. Yes, it has. Now I'm choosing not to. But if anybody knows someone, no, I digress. So after that last failed relationship, I decided to move forward with fertility treatments. So at first I started with IUIs and I went very, at first it was just, I just went very slowly in the progression of infertility. I never did IVF, but I did 26 IUIs. So that was 13 months of back-to-back IUIs, 2 days in a row each cycle.
And can you explain, just tell what IUI is?
Oh, yeah.
Just the people who don't know, maybe.
Intrauterine insemination, or what what my brother-in-law kindly referred to as basting.
Oh no.
Um, so after all of that, I took a break. And long story short, it was a 3-year period of struggling with infertility. And when I realized that that probably wasn't in the cards for me, I did grieve, and it was hard, and there was a lot of really ugly tears. And then I thought about adoption, but I didn't really know what that meant. And I had a whole lot of myths in my head about who my child would be and
Mhm.
who a birth mother is. And I didn't know anything about open adoption at the time. But I was scared and nervous. But I think what happened for me is that I decided to start sharing what was going on with me with certain people.
Mhm.
And the more I opened up, the more resources came to me. And the more people would share with me, it's really fascinating to me when you can feel brave enough to share your story. How many people come crawling out of the woodwork
Yeah.
to say, me too, me too, me
Yeah.
too.
Because everyone feels like they're alone
And nobody
until they
wants to
hear other
talk about
stories.
things. I
Yeah.
know.
Yep.
So, I so in one of those conversations, it was I don't even remember who it was with, but she gave me the name of a whole bunch of agencies to call, um, and the name of an adoption consultant. And like many other people, I had never heard of an adoption consultant. In my mind, she gave me the one and only person who was such a person. And I called her. She was in Florida, and I was in Chicago at the time. And she told me she was going to hold my hand and walk me through the whole process. And I sent my thousands of dollars to Florida, and I just prayed that it was legit. And from that first phone call with my consultant to the time and she told me, by the way, I'm Jewish, I was in my 40s, and I'm single. And she's like, well, those are 3 strikes against you. It may take some time.
Wow.
Um, 9 months from that very, very first phone call to say, who are you and what do you do? My baby was home with me in my arms. So I was matched very quickly after all my paperwork and everything was done. And I did it on my own. And people said to me, you're crazy. It's hard enough with 2 people. And my answer to them was always, that's your reality. I won't
Exactly.
know. I won't know any difference. I won't know
Everyone's
that it's
lives are
easier or
different.
harder with
Yeah.
2 people, right? So, and it's funny because sometimes I remember going out when I had a baby, and I'd be around couples who were fighting over who was going to change the baby's diapers, and you go do this, and I was sitting there going, just do it. Like I do everything. What's the big deal?
Right, exactly.
So, I mean, that's on a very, very quick overview, high level. That's kind of what
Yeah.
my process, and I was definitely one of the lucky ones as far as how smoothly and quickly it went. There
Yeah, but you
were
went through a lot of struggle leading up to that too.
I did, and everybody has their own stories and their
Right.
own struggles, and it was heartbreaking, and it was really hard. In fact, I remember on the exact same day that I got the results of my very last IUI, I knew it was the end for me. My sister was also going through infertility, and we both got our answers on the same day, pregnant or not pregnant. And she got pregnant, and I got not
Oh, oh
pregnant.
wow.
And I remember that was tough. I
Yeah.
remember thinking, okay, I am so happy for my sister. Something just popped up. And we're in the same family. I cannot steal her thunder here. I can't call anybody in my family to grieve with me. So
That's
I had
tough.
to do that on my own and kind of with my friends, which was fine. And I eventually, told my family, but it was really a lonely feeling to know that, I can't take that time away from her because she's not going to get this back.
Right.
So I had this kind of a day where I was like, I don't know, what I'm supposed to feel and what I'm supposed to do. But in the long run, looking back on now, I wouldn't trade anything about my story. If somebody said to me right now, and I could, if I was young,
So sorry.
if I was younger and somebody said to me, you could get pregnant and you would 100% have a healthy baby and you'd get pregnant like this. You ready to go? I'd say, no, I'd rather adopt because I don't need that like I needed it, like I thought I needed at one point. And I remember people saying to me when I was struggling with, do I go the adoption route? Or even before I even started my whole journey, people would say to me, Becca, it doesn't matter how you become a mom. You're not going to love your child any more or any less. I think I love my child more because I had to try way harder than a lot of people, and I don't take it for granted. But you don't. After your child comes into your life, it doesn't matter how that happens.
Exactly. That's a great message to send to people.
Yeah.
Such a great message.
Yeah.
Wow. And so how old is your son now?
He is 9. He just turned 9 this summer.
And he knows that he's adopted?
Yeah, so I adopted him at birth. I got there shortly after he was born. And from the very first day, I talked about his birth mom. And at that time, I just knew his birth mom. I didn't know really about his birth dad, but I would tell him the story of his adoption. And I was really lucky. I got to meet his birth mom shortly after she chose me. We had a phone call. And I remember I was so nervous. It's like when you say to this woman, like you've never met, you have all this imagination going on around about who she might be. And I think, we all get so scared of the unknown. And once we're faced with something in front of us, how many times have we all said, oh my God, what was I scared of? I wish I would have done this so long ago.
It's always the anticipation of
always. And I deal with that with my families every day. It's like there's this fear of the unknown. Like we have a picture in our head a lot of times of who this woman is who has made an adoption plan. And yet when you sit right across and look into another woman's eyes and realize I'm looking into the eyes of a woman just like me who has a different story,
Yeah.
And it doesn't take away from who she is or who I am. We're both, beautiful women who have found each other in this unusual kind of a union. And I feel really, really blessed that I have that kind of openness with my son's birth mother and now his birth father too. But he has always known his story and where he's come from. And from the very, very beginning, we would do FaceTime. I remember when he was really young, we would FaceTime with his birth mom. And every time when we got off the phone, we said, we love you.
Oh.
And he said, I love you. And it really is a love.
Yeah.
I really do feel that kind of relationship with her.
That's
and it
amazing.
wasn't so
That's
scary
awesome.
after all.
That's so
It
great.
took my family, probably even now, they're a little hesitant, like I think it's very, very common for families to want to protect you and be like, are you sure you want to have a relationship? Are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure? Well, what if? What if she comes knocking on your doorstep and wants the baby back? It doesn't happen. It's a myth.
Right.
It just does not happen. And I get that feeling of wanting to protect the people we love.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I'm so glad that I was open enough to allow myself to learn and to sit in front of birth moms and learn that they're human beings and they're women just like I am, and to be a little bit less scared. And the opportunity I had to go meet her ahead of time. I mean, she's as sweet as can be. And I just, I know not every situation is like that, but I feel very blessed to
You
have
should
her in our
be.
lives. Yeah.
Wow. And does he ever, how did he react when, I mean, of course, I know you said from day one you told him, but like, has there ever been like comments he made or concerns he's had?
You know, not when he was very young, there were moments in his life that I could tell he was processing what this means that he was in somebody else's tummy,
Hmm.
or that he had two moms, or, whatever words I used,
Right.
and or just what this word adopted meant. And I would see themes. He might start crying over a song. Like I remember specifically The Lion King, there was something about it. And he cried for a long time. And I was like, what is going on? Because my son doesn't cry a whole lot.
Hmm.
He never did. And only like a day or two later, he was asking me questions having to do with a mom. And as it pertained to The Lion King. And I was like, oh my God, he's been processing this. He's trying to figure it out. And he had this common theme of seeing kids, who would walk alone or whatever on the street. He would always say, they lost their mommy, they lost their mommy. And so it was, and I'm so curious to hear from any other adoptive families if they've had those moments of, I saw the moment, I know exactly when they started to process it and understand it for the first time.
Hmm.
But it's kind of like, because I've been talking to him about it since the day he was born, it wasn't like this moment where his world was shattered and he had to, like, what does this mean, and process it. He had always known, but it was like he was just kind of putting all the pieces together.
Right. Exactly. And that's the
And
hardest part is not hearing it. It's just after what you do after hearing it, like you said, putting everything together, the
yeah,
questions, the concerns, the feeling of like you're grieving a loss of someone you didn't even know.
yeah, I think he did go through a little bit of a grieving process, and I'm sure that that will happen again as he gets older. We now have an open relationship with both his birth father and his birth mother, and we do
Hmm.
FaceTime so he can see them. He sees he has many siblings, half siblings on both sides. And so he's seen them, and it'll be interesting to see how he hasn't had a lot of questions because it's been so out in the open. But
Right,
I do
exactly.
constantly bring it up to let that space be open and be allowed for that conversation so that he always knows it's a safe space and it's a safe thing to talk about. I mean, I'm also an adoption professional, so he hears me talking about adoption every single day, which is probably more than most families. But
Wow,
yeah, I feel lucky to have that open relationship. And
that's good.
we got to visit her for the first time last year it was during National Adoption Awareness Month last year that we met his birth mother in person for the first time,
And
or
how
that
did
he
he
did.
feel during
Oh, he
that? Like, how
loved
did
it.
you feel?
He had a smile on his face the whole time, and because I had no idea. Um, and so did I. I felt really at peace, and it was great, and it wasn't awkward, and it was totally fine. Um, I don't know, maybe I lucked out. She's an awesome
You
woman.
definitely did.
But I think a lot of us do. I think a lot of us do if we allow it. You know,
Exactly. I couldn't
we
agree
have to
more.
sometimes back up to see
Yeah.
how lucky we are in the cards that we've been dealt.
Yeah. And then sometimes we think that we wonder why something didn't happen for us or, um, you know, just like realize like that led us to where we are now. We could have had this life, but then we wouldn't have had these
Yeah.
people in our lives. And that's what
I,
I'm learning too every day is things happen for a reason and we don't know why, but they do.
I think God blessed me for not giving me anybody with my genes. I think he knew what he was doing.
Um,
um, yeah.
Wow.
What else can I tell you? Now, like 2 years after I adopted, so what happens a lot of times to a lot of people after you adopt a baby, a lot of other people come to you and say, "Oh my gosh, I'm thinking about adopting too. How did you do it?" You know, and one thing I'll tell you now is feel free to ask all the questions you want if you're a hopeful adoptive parent, but don't necessarily go jumping to the same place somebody else did just because somebody else had a good um, situation and outcome,
Mm-hmm.
because without knowing exactly what those circumstances were, it may or may not be the right place for you. But I remember after I adopted, people would come to me, especially single women, and ask me about my adoption. And I told them, you cannot adopt unless you work with my adoption consultant, because that's
Mm-hmm.
the only way I'll let you do it. Like I was already that firm on don't do it alone.
Right.
It's too much to navigate on your own. There's so much you don't know, and you need guidance. So
You need a
I
support
think,
system to like,
yeah. And I sent her like 7 people, and I would counsel them all on the back end. Um, she was amazing, but she actually didn't adopt herself. And I felt like, there was just something, she could have all the knowledge in the world, but there's something that she's never been through that I can help guide people on. So I would counsel them all on the back end. And I did that for 2 years. And after 2 years, and I'm somebody who's always wanted to start my business, I've always been inspired by women who are powerful or
mm-hmm.
entrepreneurs. And
And you
after
became
two
one.
years, after 2 years, first I called her up and I said, "Hey, do you want to partner? I would love to do this." And she said, "You know what? I'm not ready. Call me in a year." And I hung up the phone. I'm like, "No, this is my time and I'm going to do this." And
Mm-hmm.
so I called her right back and I said, "I'm your competitor now. Will you help me a little bit?" So she guided me a little bit, but and that's when RG Adoption Consulting was born. Really, that was really scary to start a business on my own. I didn't know what I was doing. And then that
Yeah.
first person who called me, I remember I launched my website, and the first person to call me was a single woman. And I said to her, you can work with other people. I would understand. I know what I'm doing, and she said to me, I'll never forget it. And she said, "I called you for a reason. I looked at your website. I was attracted to your story. I was drawn to you. I called you for a reason." And she gave me the confidence I needed to go forward. And I said to her, I said, "Don't think I don't know what I'm doing, because I know how to guide you."
Yeah.
Um, and anyways, it turns out that she ended up having a different adoption story, but after we worked together. But the very first person who adopted through me ended up becoming my very first consultant when I started growing my team. So my client became
Oh, that's
my
amazing.
consultant years later, and now she's on my board for Back to the Roadmap Fund.
That's so great.
So it all comes. I keep my families around. We've
Yes.
become tight. Yeah, I never want them to leave.
See,
It's like this
everything comes
big family.
together.
Yeah.
If you want something, you just got to go and do it.
You got to go and do it, but you got to
Yeah,
build the community around you for
exactly.
whatever you're doing, right?
Oh,
Whether
yeah.
it's starting your own business, whether it's adopting, whether it's
Hmm.
fertility, like don't be afraid to share your story, because you'll find other like-minded people who are so willing to help you and so
Hmm.
willing to cheer you on and support you. And that's one of the really big main focuses of my business, is creating that kind of safe community for my families, because I don't know if you've seen it, I'm sure you have, but the adoption world out on social media can be really volatile at times.
Yes.
It's also really educational and you can learn a lot. And I highly recommend it. You can learn a lot from the whole adoption constellation. And it can also be very volatile. And you have to be
Yeah.
careful what you're willing to share so publicly in such a broad arena. So to kind of bring it in and be with people that you know are safe. Hey, Shabakia, how are you? I think is really important. And I've tried really hard to create that kind of space for our families
Yeah.
for while they're going through it, but also forever, because adoption, I mean, community and education are two things that you're going to need for the rest of your life.
Right.
especially when you adopt. Around adoption, you're going to need an adoption community and
Mm-hmm.
you're going to need adoption education, because that doesn't end when you bring your baby home.
No, that's when like the real support needs to come.
That's when the real support begins. And I know you're obviously on the other end of it because,
Yeah, since I'm an
as an
adoptee,
adoptee.
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I was going to ask you a question today and I lost it. I just lost it. It'll come to
Well,
me.
while you're thinking, so it's weird when you were talking about adoption, how it could be it could be intense, Remembrance Day. It actually took me pretty hard. I put a post up and I never thought like, people who are
What's
adopted,
Remembrance Day?
so it's actually adoptees who have lost their lives to suicide
Oh,
or have been murdered by their birth or their adoptive families.
I've never heard of this.
Okay, so I thought it was just me, and I actually
No.
I cried because I was just so sad. Like I struggled a lot, with my adoption, and I'm just learning to accept everything now, and I'm going through the healing process. But I see, it's bad enough that adoptees are taking their lives because of the struggle, but
Mm.
for me to hear that their adoptive parents took their lives
Mm.
just hit me even
I
harder
can't
because
even.
they're supposed to take them in. That's supposed to be a loving, stable, supportive
Mm.
environment for them. And it broke my heart. I mean, I never even realized that was a thing,
Yeah.
honestly. I never
I'd
even
be
thought about that.
curious. I mean, not that it makes it any better or not, but I'd be curious to know the statistics of um, are those families that their adoptions came through the foster care system or private? And
I
the reason I ask that is just because I know the process of becoming, our foster care system is broken in so many ways.
guess it is.
And I'm just curious if there's any correlation.
I'm
Uh,
gonna look into that. I want to do more research on that because
yeah, I mean,
that should be
it's a
really brought.
beautiful thing as long as they're doing the right kinds of background checks and of these
Exactly.
families. But I've heard so many horrific stories about children who just get placed into the wrong homes.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's
I mean, they're
so
already
sad.
coming from
Hey, Ashley.
bad environments, and then they're being put into more bad environments,
Yeah,
and the poor kids don't even have a chance
yeah,
for that loving, environment.
yeah.
That's really all kids want. They want to feel like they belong. They want to feel wanted. They wanted to feel chosen, and they just want to feel loved. And if they can't get any of that from the people who adopted them, I don't. I mean, it breaks my heart.
I actually want to say something about that because, as a parent now to a 9-year-old, and especially as a single parent,
Mhm.
it ain't easy. I'll tell you that much.
I'm
Parenting is
sure it's
not
not.
easy.
I'm sure.
Parenting in and of itself is not easy. Parenting alone is not easy. And I think that sometimes, maybe I'm speaking for myself, but there feels like this added layer of guilt when I don't feel like I'm doing a good job as a parent. Now, let me tell you, every parent feels like they're screwing their child up.
Right.
I mean, if you're not, please call me, private message me, and let me know your secret. Um, and I think that as an adoptive parent, there's this pressure sometimes that I
Hmm.
feel that I have to be like a more perfect parent because I was chosen to be this child's parent. Like I have a responsibility to his birth mom,
Hmm.
and I can't ever let her know that sometimes I yell too much or that I'm not perfect in her eyes.
You don't want to feel
Nancy,
like you're
Nancy, if
failing.
you're watching this, no, I'm not perfect, but I love you and I promise I'm good for your child. But it's just, I don't know. It's interesting where this conversation is leading, but I think about that a lot sometimes. I mean, just the whole parenting and adoption and education, right? That's how now it's all kind of come into
Hmm.
one right now. This is exactly why you need continuing education, and we need to talk about what happens at the different layers, not just for your child, but for you as a
Hmm.
parent.
Exactly. to interrupt you really quick, Marianne said, thank you so much for sharing about open adoption. I need to
Mm,
hear it. I'm so afraid about open adoption, but I feel
mm.
that it's right away. It's right. It's the right way.
It's, yeah, I feel it's the right way too. I mean, I
Hmm.
know so as a professional and having read and learned over the last 9 years, I've learned so much. Somebody called me today on the phone and she adopted twice and they want to adopt again. And she's like, I know all the things. Like, I know everything I need to know. I was like, oh, no, you don't. No, you don't, honey. 9 years later, I still don't know all the things. But
You learn every day.
you learn every day. But
Hmm.
I do think that it helps if you're new to this and you're wondering about open adoption, do whatever you can to sit in front of, I know it's hard during COVID, but go on a Facebook Live. There's plenty going on right now, Instagram and Facebook, and look into the eyes of a birth mother and hear them speak about their experience. There's plenty on Instagram, there's plenty on Facebook, and hear their stories. And, whether they're looking back in your eyes or not, look into their eyes. And I think that it helps to dissipate some of the fear when you can hear their voice and hear their story and see their emotion and look in their eyes. It takes a lot of the fear away. And then when you meet each other in such a vulnerable state, I knew right away, like my only obligation was pictures and letters through the agency. That's all I was obligated to do. I mean, when I adopted even 9 years ago, the thought of like a yearly visit like wasn't didn't exist. Now we see that more and more. Ashley said the
Hmm.
healthiest for the child's birth mom and ultimately for the childbirth mom and ultimately the adoptive mom. I agree. And I have felt that, and it's been a process. So things go in and out a lot too. So she may want to, like right after the birth, it's very common for a birth mom to text like 24/7. First of
Yeah,
all,
because
she's
it was an open
jacked up on
adoption.
emotion. Yeah, for an open adoption, especially. I
Right.
mean, what I was saying, I was only obligated pictures and letters when we saw each other for the first time, or maybe it was at the hospital. I was like, you know what? Who wants to print up pictures, stick them in an envelope, and put them in the mail and get stamps? I don't. Can I just text you? So we just exchanged, and from there, like it was just easy. But then what I was going to say is right after the adoption, it's very common for a birth mom, at that time she's a birth mom, to like be checking in with you a
Hmm.
lot. And it may feel really intrusive, like, whoa, this is too much. This is not what I signed up for.
Right.
But we have to understand that she is on, her hormones are so jacked up at the
And it's
moment.
an
And she
emotional time
just
too.
handed her baby over. Like, it may be a lot for you, but in those moments, we have to give her grace and we have to
Hmm.
be there as a support because
Hmm.
it's how I truly believe it's how you show up during that particular hard time for her that sets the tone for the rest of the relationship. And it's not going to be like that forever. It ebbs and flows. So I remember that time and I was okay with it, but the constant text for 3 days and then it starts to go away. And then what's a common thing is then it gets to be too much for her. And maybe she'll go in a shell and maybe you're going to stop hearing from her for a while. It might be a
Hmm.
short time, it might be a long time. That happened to me too. She wasn't in our lives for a couple years and it saddened me so much because it was without explanation. And then all of a sudden she showed up again and I was so grateful. I'm like, please don't go away again because
Yeah.
that would be really hard for my child, but and for me. Um, but it ebbs and flows, just like any relationship, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And it was like what I was saying earlier about, how adoptee children, like, they go through the grieving of the loss of their birth families that they never even knew.
Hmm.
And it's like, I don't look at it in like the birth mother's eyes, but they're grieving a loss too.
Yeah.
And that actually, what you just said kind of like brought me a little emotional because I never really like stop and think of my birth mother's side and like the day she handed me over, how that
Mm.
must have felt for her. And that really, that that brings up a lot of emotions.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I always think of me, how I felt growing up and all,
Hmm.
but I never thought of how she felt giving me up and not seeing me every day or giving away her firstborn. So,
Every every person involved, the adoptive parent, the birth mother, the adoptee, they each had their own struggle and their own story from their own point of view.
yeah,
And sometimes we get so caught up in our own point of view that we forget about the point of view of the other two in that constellation. I like the word
exactly.
constellation. I've always used triad, but I heard someone use constellation today and I love that.
Yeah.
It's complicated. There's just so many layers. And sometimes the layers get piled on and sometimes they get peeled back
Yep.
for all of us. But,
So I have a question. So it's what I'm going to ask everybody who's going to be coming on live with me this month is, what does adoption mean to you?
I don't know why that's such a hard question
It
for
really
me.
is.
The first thing that comes to my mind is it's complicated. And maybe it's a complicated love story, a complicated love story. I'm going with
I
that.
love
I
that.
love it.
I'm going to write that down. I love that.
Adoption is a complicated love story.
Love story. I love that. Because it's all in that. I mean, there's a
Yeah,
message right behind all that. It is complicated
yeah, and beautiful
and beautiful at
all
the
at the
same
same
time.
time. Hmm.
Yep.
We hope it's beautiful.
It's a beautiful mess.
Yeah, and you know, it can be beautiful for everybody involved. And I think sometimes that message gets lost. Anyways, that's a whole nother conversation
Yeah.
that we don't have time
We
to
might need
for.
another live for that
We
one.
might need another life for that one.
So the last
Anyways,
question I have for you is, what advice would you give for a single woman or man who wants to adopt?
my,
What they need to know for that and what they need to prepare for.
um, you can do it. Hopefully you have a community of support around you because that is a super important piece of it. You need a support system around you to help you hold up all the pieces. So I would say figure out, just kind of take inventory about your community and who's part of your support system. If you have that and you feel like it's strong, I know that you can do it. And I'll tell you this also, if there's any single hopeful adoptive mamas out there, I've heard so many people who call me and say, I know it's going to be hard for me to adopt because I'm single or because I'm over 40. People ask that question all the time. It only takes one expectant mother for you to match with, the right one. It's no harder for you than anybody else. Our single mamas, I think they match quicker than our couples so much
Oh,
of the time. So don't let anybody tell you, oh, it's going to be harder for you because you're single. It's baloney. And I'm sticking to it.
good. Because I plan on adopt, and if I'm still single in a couple years, I want to adopt.
You're
So
coming to me, baby.
I'm
I'll help you
coming to you.
out.
Get ready for me. I'm coming.
Okay.
Um, but
Don't
wow.
wait till you're too old. You
No.
need the energy.
Well, I'm 32, so I'm giving myself 2 years.
Okay. All right.
So just to wrap up, so again, Rebecca is the founder of RG Adoption Consulting Agency, and
Not
she's also
agency, just consulting. And I said just RG Adoption Consulting.
okay. Because on the Instagram it says agency on there, so I just
Oh, it does. I probably didn't have a choice. And I say not agency because I don't do placements.
okay,
It's
okay,
illegal for a consultant and for many facilitators for us to do placements. So I don't want to confuse anybody by using the word agency. I guide you
okay.
to the right
Yeah,
agencies.
that's where
Yeah.
I got that word. But okay, I
Yeah.
will.
Sorry. I'll
It's
look at
okay.
that.
and also started the Back to the Roadmap Fund. So how are ways we can come support you? Is there donations or anything that
Oh
you
my
take?
God, yes. Hold on, I gotta, oh shoot, I don't have it at my fingertips, but oh geez. I didn't have that prepared. There's a text number that you can text to. Let
You
me
know
see
what?
if
It's okay.
I can put it in the comments, but I might be able to find it within
Well, I'm gonna
two
upload our
seconds.
video to my page, and then so if when you find it, you could just reply to it and give it all the information in there if you like.
Okay, I will. I'll do it
Okay.
there. But you can also go to rgadoptionconsulting.com for more information about consulting services if you want to adopt. And then there is a page on there that is a link for Back to the Roadmap Fund.
And what state are you based out of again?
Well, I am personally in Ohio. I had to think for a minute because I just moved from Illinois. But we work with people all over the country, and I have
Okay.
consultants who work with me all over the country too.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much for
Well, I
having
don't
me on.
think
This was so fun.
of course, I'm so glad you could come on with me and share your
Yay.
story and your advice and oh, that's amazing by the way that you're a single mom. Just
Thank
lets
you.
people know that they can do it.
Thank you. I'm always
Well,
the
it
one
doesn't look
asking other
like
people for their stories, so it's kind of nice to remember and share mine
yeah.
too.
Well, that's the same thing. I feel like I just been talking about my story that all for the past few weeks, and I'm like, I need to hear someone else. Like I'm getting
Yeah.
tired of hearing myself.
Oh,
All
you're
right, so it
welcome.
looks like
Oh,
we do not have any questions. Thank you, ladies. Appreciate your stories. You're welcome. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Rebecca, thank you again.
you're welcome.
And I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.